Hi everybody, welcome to the first video on cell biology, which is the first topic in biology GCSE for AQA. What we're going to look at today is just some general cell structure. We'll ease ourselves in gently with a bit of drawing. So we're going to look at what makes up plant and animal cells, what does eukaryotic and prokaryotic mean, the first of two of many lovely terms of biology, and what makes up a typical bacterial cell as well. So grab some paper, grab some pens and follow along with me. Start off, we're going to look at some of these key terms, some of these words that are going to come up quite a lot in this section, and work out what they mean so when they come up in future we're a bit more confident. So first one is prokaryotic, and I quite like to break words up and have a look at what different parts of the words mean, because that usually helps us piece together kind of like a weird word puzzle for us to work out, especially in science, what lots of new terms mean before we even had a look at them. So prokaryotic, we can see that these two terms both have this karyotic part, but they have a different bit at the beginning, and that gives us a clue as to what the words mean. So pro means before, I believe it's Latin or Greek, and eu means, hang on, I've just got to look it up a sec. Hey Google, you, it's not to do with any sort of origin of the word, but you, as in you person watching, are a eukaryotic organism. So that means that's animals and plants. So we came after the bacteria. So you, as an animal, are eukaryotic. So that helps us break up the words and sort of see what they mean, but we need definitions that we can get out on our piece of paper during an exam. So prokaryotic is any type of cell, usually bacteria, that does not have any structures inside that are in a little membrane. So there's no nucleus, there are no ribosomes, there are no mitochondria, for example, no chloroplasts. They are much simpler life forms. On the other hand, eukaryotic cells are much more complex. So they have additional structures, mitochondria, cell walls, vacuoles, depending on what type of cell you are. So your cells in your body are eukaryotic. Our last key term is cell. Now, you probably know what cells are. It's one of those terms that's really hard to describe. So in biology, we just call cells the building blocks of living organisms or living things. So think of them like cells are individual Lego cubes, and when you put those Lego cubes together to make a line, that's like a tissue because they're all working together. And then you stack those cubes to make a wall, and that's like an organ. And then you put four walls together and some other little bits like a roof and a little bird and whatever we want to do in your Lego. That would be like an organ system, and then putting that into your Lego city, that would be your organism. So cells are like Lego, they are the building blocks of life. Right, let's delve right in and look at some eukaryotic cells, animal and plant cells. In exams, you need to be able to identify the structures on any type of animal cell, so we're going to look at specialised cells in a future video, but just remember these animal and plant cells are not the only type of animal and plant cells that exist. The structures in them are sort of generic, so that means they're representative. They sort of, you know, an animal cell has all the bits in that you'd see in any animal cell, and a plant cell has all the bits you'd probably see in a plant cell, but not all animal and plant cells are exactly alike. So take this as almost like a blueprint rather than gospel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be drawing using lots of colour. You don't have to have the same colours, but I would, if you don't have colours, just make sure your labels are clear and you know exactly which part is which, because lots of the parts in animal and plant cells are the same. So I'm going to use colours to colour code each part, so hopefully at a glance you'll be able to have a look at what's the same and what's different, because that's often what they want you to talk about. So the first structure that an animal cell has, that plant cell also has, is a cell membrane. You look from my pictures that these two cells are different shapes. Plant cells are usually regular shapes of squares, hexagons, rectangles. Animal cells can be any old shape. They can be blobs, they can be long and thin, they can be in the shapes of different parts. Depends what you need. So animal cells are irregular, plant cells are regular shapes. Now this cell membrane, what its job is to control what substances enter and leave the cell, a bit like a bouncer at a nightclub. It will only let you in if it likes the look of you, and it will only let people out that they feel, I don't know, it's time for them to go kind of thing. The next part that they both share is the nucleus. Now often people talk about nucleus as being the brain. It's the brain of the cell, which I can understand because it does control a lot of the cell's actions, but quite often people get that confused with it having conscious thought or having control. So often when we look at sperm cells in the next video, for example, lots of people seem to think the sperms are alive like tadpoles because they look like little tadpoles swimming around. But the cell's brain is only a brain in the fact that it makes instructions to make different proteins which cause chemical reactions to happen. So rather than saying it's the brain of the cell, which probably wouldn't get you marks in an exam, you need to say that it controls the cell and it contains DNA or genetic material, all your genes. The next part they both share are the memeiest part of them all, the mitochondria. I can already hear you out there in the internet land going, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, which is a joke I've never heard in my entire life. Basically, the mitochondria aren't the powerhouse of the cell. I kind of see where the idea comes from. Like a powerhouse, you think of generating electricity. What mitochondria do is release energy, which is what you need to live, basically, to do chemical reactions and move your arms about. So that energy comes from a chemical reaction inside those mitochondria. The next part they both share are the smallest parts of the cells called ribosomes, and their job is to make protein. The final bit they both share is the white stuff in here, which I'm going to draw in black because white on white ain't a good look. So the white stuff inside here is like a jelly-like substance. It's called cytoplasm, and it's where most of the chemical reactions in the cell happen, including anaerobic respiration. The next parts are only found in plant cells. So animal cells and plant cells share these 5 main key features, and you would be expected to know that both of them are shared. Often they'll have a 1 or 2 mark question that involves knowing the differences. So all the bits I'm drawing now I'm going to keep to this side because they are plant cell only. The first structure is a cell wall which goes around the outside of the cell like the wall on a house. Oh, the army have turned up. Just imagine it's going all the way up here, but I don't want to mess up any of the writing. Now, if you remember stuff about the cell wall, you probably think, oh, it protects the cell. Everyone says the first thing, one of the most common answers I get when we talk about cells, especially in lower school, even in year 11, is cell walls protect the cell. Now, I can kind of understand why, because they are like a barrier, like a wall that your house protects your house. but in plants, they're not there for protection. It's not going to stop a virus getting into the cell. What it is for is for strengthening the cell. So the reason why plants like these ones can sort of stand up on their own without having a skeleton is the cell walls and the structures within are actually keeping it really stiff and keeping it in place. The next part of the cell in a plant cell is the chloroplast, and it's what makes plants green. So whenever you think of, grass being green, it's these structures within the cell that are green themselves, which give all plants that green colour. The chloroplasts, as they're called, are where photosynthesis happens in the cell, so they're absorbing light. The reason why they're green is there's a pigment, so a colour in them called chlorophyll. So you might be asked that in an exam as well, especially in high tier. The last part that's found in the plant cell is called the vacuole. It's usually the largest structure inside of the cell. The vacuoles contain something called sap, which is just a storage place for water and minerals. It's used with the cell wall to provide structure in the plant, so when this is full of water, it's sort of pressing up against the sides and holding it out. And when you don't water your plants for a while and the plant starts to wilt, it starts to droop, it's because this bag of water is basically emptied a little bit, and that's making things, lose its strength and they fall over. Think full vacuole is old McDonald's plastic straw that when you use it for your milkshakes, you can suck it up all right, but compared to the new eco-friendly but not as great paper straws, that's like the vacuole that's lost a bit of water, they just collapse under the pressure. Right, that's animal and plant cells. We've just got one more to look at, but I just need to clear my board. Last cell type we're going to look at is a prokaryotic cell, so bacteria. And again, with our animal and plant cell examples, this is not the only type of bacteria that exists, it's just a model. So you might have a different bacteria cell, but if they had similar structures, for example, the flagella we'll look at, you'd be able to recognise on any of them, if there's a long squiggly bit coming out of it, it's the flagella. If there's a long squiggly bit inside of it, it's the DNA loop, etc. So we're going to start off by drawing the general structure. Bacteria come in many shapes. Some of them are circular, some of them are sort of a long like sphere, some of them are even like twisty, kind of like Ebola viruses. But when we're looking at the general structure, we draw it kind of like a plant cell, just so it's nice and big. So bacteria cells share with plant cells the feature that it has a cell wall. And again, this is for structure and support. Bacteria cells, some of them also have, coming out of their cell walls, it could be on one side, could be around the whole thing, some long tubey-like bits that look like a tail because they act like one. So these are called flagella, and they're used like a tadpole's tail or like a sperm's tail to help the bacteria swim or move. Just like with our animal and plant cells, bacterial cells also have a cell membrane. And it has the same function as in an animal and plant cell. And the same with our animal and plant cell, they also have cytoplasm. Where eukaryotic and prokaryotic cells differ greatest is where their genetic material is, or what form their genetic material is in, their genes. So in an animal or plant cell, you'll find them in the nucleus, but in a bacteria, they have no nucleus, so their DNA is just sort of floating free inside the cytoplasm. They have two forms of DNA. Here's the first one. It's just a large squiggle. It's just a big long strings of DNA that are floating free in the cytoplasm. and this is what we call the DNA loop. So this is where the instructions are that control the bacterial cell. The other form the DNA takes is called a plasmid. They are little circular rings of DNA. They have really interesting uses in medicine actually. You can use these plasmids to actually cause bacteria to make insulin. And we'll look at insulin when we get onto the homeostasis topic much later on in the videos. But all you need to know at this stage is it is a small ring of DNA. And that's that. There's no mitochondria, no ribosomes. Bacterial cells, because they're before, they're pretty simple and also a lot smaller. That's us done for the day. I'd say as an extra challenge for yourself today, draw yourself a little Venn diagram or draw yourself a little table and compare the structures in a prokaryotic cell with eukaryotic cells generally, and then compare animal and plant cells, because that's what you usually have to talk about in the exams. And make sure you check back soon, because we're going to be looking at specialised cells and how cells divide in this topic as well. So I hope you enjoyed yourself, and I will see you all very soon.